As we've been expanding our collection of locomotives here on our O-Gauge Railroad, you may have noticed there's a few more steam engines than diesel. And a big part of that is just the interest factor of watching all the different shapes and sizes and all of the pomp and circumstance of the running gear that's happening between all these different locomotives. Whether it's the big boy over here or this little switcher, all of the connecting rods and pistons and wheels and all that stuff is just more interesting to watch, especially on a layout like ours where this couch pretty much has you sitting at track height watching all those going around. It's a lot of fun. As a result, I've also tried to add a little bit of variety to our collection by making sure I'm not getting too many duplicates of wheel arrangements that we have. So I thought it would be fun to make a video showcasing all the different types that we have here on our railroad. So it's not all of them that have ever existed, but it's actually quite a fair amount of engines that have, whether it's this 060 switcher or the big 4884 on the big boy, to everything in between. So this should be fun. First up is this 060 switcher. Ours is the Dockside switcher, which is a popular Lionel design. It's got tons of detail and works great, you guessed it, in the switch yards. This is actually a scale proportioned engine, but because it's actually tiny in real life, it means it looks great around scale and semi-scale engines. And I love it for that fact. Super versatile, super handy to use, and this control feature not only means that it's really easy to use in and out of the yards and change directions super easily, but it's also got front and rear electrocouplers, which more of the modern Lionel Docksiders have. Some of the older ones don't have this feature, they have manual couplers, but they still work great because this wheel arrangement is super tiny. They're a little bit uneven over switches and things like that, but you're usually not going to run these things at high speed anyways because they work better at slower, more delicate maneuvers in close quarter spaces like the switch yards. Duh, it's called a switcher. Now, before we move on, yes, technically there's an 040, which is even smaller, but again, this is the smallest one that we have in our collection. Moving along, we've got this 080 switcher, which is, as you guessed it, slightly larger, but also has a tender, which makes it even larger to use. Ours has been switched to being Lion Chief control, and this is a popular engine design from Lionel. Again, another scale size engine. It's okay in the switch yards, but there's two things that kind of make this one not as handy as the smaller one. First of all, it doesn't have the greatest pickups, so ironically enough, this switcher likes to die on switches. It has trouble over them. But also, this one doesn't have front and rear electrocouplers, so I have to reach in and manually uncouple and couple things. And this can get a little bit tedious on those lines that are further away. Because of the extra length and space it takes up in the yard, and because of those issues over the switches, it's not quite as versatile or usable as this 060 switcher, but I'm sure in real life it would have been fine. Let's go back to the Old West for this museum piece. This is a 440 American type. This one is done up to look like number 119 that the Union Pacific had at Promontory Summit for the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad signing, but it's actually just a tweaked version of Lionel's popular general design. But either way, it's an interesting design. It's an older type, obviously, and it's not exactly the strongest engine we have here, so we mostly just kind of have fun with it around the line. It has kind of crazy speed control. It just takes off and rockets around the line. Speed control aside, it's a fun engine to use. I also really like how Lionel recreated the engine design with the paint and everything, even though it's not the exact design. My son likes to use this one around our elevated line, not just because it kind of goes great up there, but also because the elevated line can make the whistle on this old baggage car we got for it actually work. Moving along to more mid-size engines, this is a 260 Mogul, and it's a recent addition to our layout, and I love using this thing. It's scale, it's small, it's got great features, and it looks really sharp in these Rio Grande colors. Even though it has the same amount of wheels as the American type we just covered, the Mogul makes better use of it because it's only got 2 up front and then 6 driving wheels spread out further for better tractive effort. So these things are super versatile. These are great jack-of-all-trades engines because it's small enough to fit on a siding, but it's big enough to be able to pull kind of mid-sized to mainline freight-sized trains. And I love using ours. It's been a great addition to the roster. The 280 Consolidation really proved itself to be useful through several different eras for steam, well on to the end of the era. because these things were designed to pull mainline freight when they were initially built in the early 1900s. But as freight trains got heavier and bigger, they were sent to the switch yards because those same heavy cars couldn't really be pulled by the smaller switching engines anymore. So consolidations continue to get used well into the mid-50s. This one specifically, number 618, lived on as an excursion engine for the Heber Valley Scenic Railroad. I did a review on this one recently. Go check it out. Add 2 more wheels and you've got the 282 Mikado. This is an incredibly famous design that got used all over the world and all over railroads in the United States. These were great passenger trains, great for hauling freight, an incredibly balanced design because of the way that the wheels were set up. You had plenty of tractive effort from the 8 wheels there in the middle, but then you had good stability from the 2 in front and 2 in the rear. Our example is a Lion Chief, and it's a semi-scale version, but it's got updated tooling, especially on the front lights. It's got nice separately applied details, and it can run really with anything, not just with Lion Chief. You can do legacy control, Bluetooth control from the app. It's super versatile. And this one's even got a rear electrocoupler, which makes it super easy for hooking it up to trains. But there's another train with the same amount of wheels that's even more famous than the Mikado. Ask anyone what they think of when they think of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and it'll be the K4, hands down. The K4 is a 462 Pacific type. These Pennsy Pacifics had square fireboxes and were workhorses for the line. If trains got too heavy, they'd double head, sometimes even triple head these things, and they beat the tar out of them until they possibly couldn't get any more miles out of them. These things are iconic. And we've got a Lion Chief version. Even though it's not a full scale, this thing is still a great hauler and is a blast to run around the line. The 464 Hudson is another incredibly famous type, and one that got most of its use on the New York Central. But you might notice that that's not exactly what we have here. Well, the Hudson's so famous that they pretty much run it in just about every road name you can think of, because Lionel trains are pretty much synonymous with the Hudson. If you don't have a Hudson on your layout, do you really have a Lionel train set? So we had to get one. This one's a Lion Chief one, kind of like the K4 that I had before. In fact, they even share a frame underneath. Just the rear wheels are a little different, but it's a great engine. Next up is the 484 Northern type. They're all a little bit different, at least the famous ones are, and ours is probably one of the most iconic. This is the Southern Pacific Daylight, number 4449. And we decided to bring it with us to our local club to run on their rails, and it was a ton of fun having it there. The Daylight's just such an iconic engine, and it's easy to spot from a mile away from that striking paint scheme. And it was a ton of fun to run it here. This engine is an older K-line type. It's got TMCC control, so it's still got some basic command control to it. While we were there, we also ran into another Northern type, 844. This one's a little more well-known on the Union Pacific, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get one of these for our line. Now things can get interesting. We're into the part where we actually add a number. Yes, that's right, I'm talking about articulated engines. Essentially, there's a whole nother running set of drivers, so you need an extra number to designate these. This one is a 2880 Bull Moose. And if you've never heard of it, then, I wouldn't blame you. But also, I made a video about this recent acquisition. This thing is so cool. It's a Right-of-Way Industries engine, so it's already pretty rare. And it's a scale engine that's articulated that can still make it around our tighter turns here on the second-hand overland. That means these 048 turnaround sections that go around the switch yards and such are no match for this behemoth. And it's brass, so the detail's phenomenal, and it's actually a lot lighter than I was expecting, especially for something so big and foreboding. It's a ton of fun to run around the rails, but I got more plans for this thing. I've heard some folks asking, when are you going to convert it to command control? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so I goofed. This 4444 T1 Duplex technically should go before the Bull Moose, because it has 2 less wheels, but this thing's stunning. I absolutely love this design. It's my favorite designed steam locomotive ever, of all time. I didn't even know it belonged to the Pennsylvania Railroad until later on, and then when I found out that they made a Lion Master version of it, I had to have it. This thing's fantastic to run it around the line, and just the proportions are great. It does a great job pulling, Even though this one's an older TMCC model, it still does a great job. And yeah, you should go get one because they're fantastic. These things rule. The 4664 Challenger is an engine I love so much. There's actually two of them here on the line. We're going to take a look at both of them. But first, 3985. This was actually the famous articulated engine before 4014's time. This engine was actually restored by Union Pacific employees in Cheyenne and pulled excursion trains in the 80s and 90s. But actually, the black Challengers should have been pulling freight cars. Passenger trains were usually pulled by something a little more striking, the Greyhound. This two-tone gray paint job with yellow pinstriping was iconic in the 50s for every Union Pacific passenger train besides the Streamliners. Between these two Lionmaster Alco Challengers, these are some of my favorite engines to run on the line, especially 3976. I don't know what it is, just something about the smoke deflectors on the side, that haunting whistle. It's just a fantastic locomotive to run, but you really can't go wrong with either. Well, you heard that, which means it's the 4884 Big Boy. We're at the end of the list, at the end of the line, with the biggest one here. Well, I mean, biggest depending on who you ask. I'm sure there's statistics and everything you could squabble over, but at the end of the day, watching all these pistons moving, watching this gargantuan thing make its way around tight turns is amazing. This is another Lion Master. It's a Lion Chief Plus 2.0, and it's great. I love the sound set on it. It runs super, super smooth, and my son and I just love running it around the layout whenever we can. We made it. I mean, we did the biggest, we started with the smallest, and I lost track of how many engines we covered. But yeah, there's still ones that we don't have, certain wheel arrangements in the white notation or whatever. Let us know what you have, what you like to run. If you saw one here that you'd like more information on, leave a comment down below. I love talking about this stuff and filling you guys in on whatever details I possibly can. But let us know which engines you guys have. And like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff, and we'll see you guys on the next one.